Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to the Celtic Down Under weekend review. My name is Anthony McGuire. As always, I'm joined by Paul Massey as we dissect Celtic 3, St Mirren 0. We may also touch on Rangers 3, Celtic 0. Not quite the scoreline we were predicting a week ago. Obviously, our primary focus on this podcast is the weekend match, which took place less than 24 hours ago. But we will obviously give you our thoughts on that pish that we watched on what was that, Thursday night, 2nd of January, wasn't it? I think it was. Yeah. It's all blurring and I've been at work, so I've kind of like everyone's just starting to go back to normal again. Apologies for being a few minutes late. We're just getting used to our new time slot, which will see us through till the clocks go back. So just moving heaven and earth to get here. But here we are. Paul, obviously a bit of disappointment last week, which we will get into in greater detail in a minute. But I obviously saw you for that match and had a few beers and nice catch up with your mum and some of your mates. So it was really nice. Actually far more enjoyable than the game itself. But how was your actual weekend? Did you get up to much, or were you just sort of counting down to hopefully Celtic redeeming themselves and not completely scuppering 2025 in the first 5 days of the year?
Yeah. So, that was definitely the catch up and the beers was definitely a highlight on Thursday. It certainly wasn't the match. I almost wanted to say less said about that the better, but we will touch on it. The weekend was good. Final test match of the Indian series with the Aussies started on Friday. So I had Thursday off because being Scottish, I've got a fundamental belief that the second should always be a public holiday, even though it isn't anywhere else other than Scotland. So the second had to be taken off anyway. I felt, and then obviously I expected to have a hangover on the third, so I had that off as well. A nice little 5-day weekend. Obviously the result put a bit of a dampener on Friday, and the hangover didn't help. But I had to take a dog to the vet. That was good. Nothing major, but not unexpected, and wasn't in my plan with a hangover. And then thankfully the test match sort of made up for it. And between that and some beers over the weekend, that's pretty much all I did for 3 days is watch cricket and have a few beers. I blame my mum. I said she was a Jonah, so I was told off by Anthony and others. But I said she was a Jonah. Anyway, the weekend is certainly better than Thursday. But just kind of spinning wheels a little bit into the game last night. Obviously 11 p.m. kickoff. Probably worth touching on the fact that our analysis is not going to be able to be as detailed as usual because we missed half an hour of the match coverage thanks to a power outage and general ineptitude from Celtic TV. So not much they can do about a power outage, but when St Mirren TV is back online before Celtic TV is, given the relative budgets of the clubs involved, it's a little bit amateurish. So just another example of subscribers of Celtic TV being.
Well, they've obviously got a generator. They've got a generator there because the emergency lighting and everything came back on fairly quick, smart. So I mean, how on earth, when you're expecting people to pay for a product, so that's not only international subscribers, this was also pay-per-view locally. It was the only way you could see the game, and it was one of the ones that was allowed to be shown pay-per-view. So the fact that they didn't have some sort of redundancy in the system is amateurish. I mean, I run a pharmacy. I've got fridges that are connected to UPS backup. So if the power goes out, those fridges continue to run because I need to guarantee that stock is maintained at a certain temperature. I mean, surely, if your product is to broadcast football for that 90 minutes or 100 minutes, however long it ends up being, that you're able to do that. Questions should be asked because St Mirren TV seemed to be far less interrupted. Admittedly, I got the stream back, but we were told it wasn't snowing in Glasgow, but it was definitely snowing on my screen because it was just green and white blobs, sort of couldn't really make out what was going on, sort of thing. And we were basically texting one another to try and figure out what happened with the third goal. So, like I said, so it was a little bit frustrating last night. But that, isn't reflective of the performance on the park, which, obviously I would say to you, Paul, that I wanted them to bounce back, particularly after such an abject performance on Thursday. And I guess I may as well deal with the elephant in the room. Like that, performance really pissed me off. Like I was quite upset, and I was actually 2024. I've done my best to try and not dwell on things and get too angry and try and have a more sort of peaceful mindset. But honest to God, for about 3 days, I was like, how on earth could we put a performance in like that against them when they are rank rotten? I mean, I'm not saying, in no disrespect, I thought Hibs played really well second half last night, but they dropped points again. So, they can't even go back-to-back games, winning games in a row. They are absolutely mince, and we made them look like $1 million. We were second to everything. Our second ball retention was terrible. Our passing was so inaccurate. So many players off the boil. I mean, you count, like I said, the only player I would give a man of the match sort of pass mark to would be Carter Vickers. I thought he could walk off the park holding his head up high. At least, he put a shift in. But Liam Stales gave the ball away for the first goal. Then that was his confidence shattered. He couldn't pass. He didn't pass it forward after that. You'd been as well taking him off after 20 minutes because he was done. And this was me saying that on a Celtic Rangers game, it doesn't really matter. Well, unfortunately, it did matter because they let him have the ball over and over again. And again, just passed it side to side. AJ's passing was all over the place. Couldn't hit a target. Kuhn didn't want to get involved, kept this laying it off every time he got the ball, didn't want to take anybody on, didn't want to get wide. Maeda not getting the ball in the right position. He was getting the ball too far up the park, so he was running out of space. So Yilmaz actually had a relatively easy time. And this is the irony, is that Tavernier probably would have played, and Butland probably would have played. And they're probably actually stronger we have in the other keeper and Yilmaz at fullback, even though he's a left footer playing him a right back, because Tavernier is obviously a liability. But yeah, I mean, the list goes on. McGregor not being able to get the ball, whole midfield just shutting down. And then, like I said, they just pounced on every time we made a mistake, and we made plenty of them. And yeah, like I said, it was just a really disappointing night. I mean, Kyogo could equalised early doors. He had a really good chance. He just somehow totally got a trap between his feet. And, if they made it one each, then that can swing the momentum. Goals change games. But apart from that, we really didn't work the keeper at all night. And we got what we deserved. And like I said, the flip side to that is obviously going into Sunday's game was that I wanted a response. Like, you can't accept that as a standard. And I know, Celtic is an aberration, but it was just abject and really, really poor. And like I said, we made them look very good. And even that, when they got the ball, half the time they kicked the ball at the park as well. So it was just very disappointing. So, Paul, I'll let you get it all off your chest because I feel better after that. Take it away.
Yeah, I've not got a huge amount to add. The one thing we wanted to see, or I wanted to see, and I think every fan was in the same boat, is a reaction to a poor performance against them in the final. We got out of jail in that game. Obviously, we showed resilience. We held it together. Our penalties were good. Yeah, you've got all the controversy around that. Penalty should have been shot. It should not have been. The point is that we got it done. And even though we let them in, we gave away cheap goals and we let them back in, at least we were in the fight and we looked like we were up for a fight. The most damning thing I can say about Thursday is we didn't look interested, and we looked gutless and a complete lack of hunger, desire, and intensity. I'll forgive a lot of things. I'll forgive, bad passing, mistakes, brain farts, aggression that gets you sent off. I'm not really willing to accept a complete lack of fight and a complete lack of desire and a complete lack of intensity. Man just come out since and said, "Oh, maybe it's because we're 14 points ahead." Not good enough. Not good enough. We as fans can say, "Oh, we're 14 points ahead. It doesn't matter. In fact, we did. I did. I said we're 14 points ahead. It doesn't make any odds if they beat us. I also said I had no expectation that we would come out of there with anything worse than a draw. And I still maintain we shouldn't have if we didn't anyway. Turned up. We didn't. It looked like they'd been on the piss since Christmas Eve, right the way through, which is pretty much what I'd been. And I still reckon I'd have shown more desire if I had pulled on the shirt. Just really, really poor. Really, really poor. You're right. You know, nearly every player was subpar. Too many of them just didn't look up for it. Didn't look up for the fight. Rangers were more up for it. They got the tactics reasonably good. Like the defense, they pressurized us. They cut down pass lanes, etc., etc. That's all well and good, and you can give them a bit of pat of the back for some of that, some meeting us some of the way. But if we pass the ball in any way, kind of competently, and put pressure back on them, then they don't beat us 3-0. It's just about as poor a performance as I can remember against them, and not really what you're looking for when we've come off the back of a previous game against them where we didn't really perform. And we talk about trends a little bit on the show, and lots of other shows talk about that in a way more detail than we do. But the away form has dipped. We were not really scoring goals away from home. We're not looking fluent away from home. Now that's Zagreb, United, and Ibrox, where we failed to score, and dropped whatever it is. What's that? 5 points out of 6 on the road.
Yeah.
So good to get back on track last night. Very least you would expect. More comfortable night than maybe a lot of people imagined, from what we could see of it. But yeah, we'll come on to touch on the manager's post-match comments later. But just a bit of a funny week all round. And yeah, I'm not 100% sure, how things are shaping up, why things have shaped up the way they have over the last week. And it's easy to sit and say, oh, it's a blip, but we shouldn't be having a blip against our major rivals when we've already had one poor performance just a few weeks ago.
Yeah, absolutely, Paul. I'm just going to run through some comments. There's some very good ones here already. So yeah, right rotten on Thursday. Worst performance since Dortmund. I'd say it was worse than the performance since Dortmund. At least in Dortmund, we looked like to try and get back into it a bit. I'm not blaming Paul's mum, so you're not getting any agreement there with me. And was made better by the Hibs result. I could just play in the weekend. Yep, so we'll get to that in a second. McLaughlin P saying it was a bit of a carbon copy of Ange's last derby at Ibrox, except that we had a full team out where Ange didn't. Yeah, maybe a fair point to be made there. John Clement's also feeling for us. We can spend £11 million on a player, but we can't get decent TV coverage. Yep, it's disgraceful. And then I think my old man here is referring to Liam Stales, and that sometimes you're better off taking somebody off than just letting them suffer. And there was 2 players, and the other one I should have mentioned was Rio Hatate. He was so far off his game. Honest to goodness, like you could have taken both of them off at halftime at Ibrox, and like I said, you would have been doing them a favor. You've been doing everybody a favor, because even if they picked up their performance levels by 10 or 15%, they were still so far below par that you're as well putting another player on. Like they'd have to have basically had a transplant at halftime, and that very rarely does that ever happen. Just finished going through these comments. I think we're good. All right. So, Paul, obviously a few changes were made between Ibrox and back at Celtic Park last night, or yesterday afternoon, Celtic Park time. So from there, changes were obviously Ida coming in up top. We had Trusty coming back into the starting lineup since the first time since the cup final in place of Liam Stales. We had Luke McCowan and Arnie Engels starting in place of Bernardo and Rio Hatate. And then the rest of the team remained unchanged. Any sort of big surprises there? I mean, obviously I've touched on Hatate and Stales already. So, I mean, I think anybody with half a football and brain could figure out that they were the two that probably should make way at least. And I think, you made the comment, maybe not, it wasn't on air, it was at the game on Thursday, about Arnie Engels probably would have been the player to start had he been well, because I think there was Brendan had a question mark over him health-wise. Had a bit of a tummy bug or a flu or whatever. So he obviously starts last night when, in ideal world, he probably would have started on Thursday. Whether that had made a difference or not, who knows? But yeah, like I said, team lineup, we sort of any real shocks or surprises, or he seems to keep making those sort of 3-4 changes at the moment to keep the team fresh. So
yeah, not overly surprised. Like all of the midfield too. Not really a huge surprise to see. Bernardo could have held his place. He wasn't the worst on Thursday, but I think McCowan and Engels were both worthy of game time. As we say, Engels has been a good run. I wanted to see him start at Ibrox. I thought it was the perfect time for him to start, obviously. Given the lead we had and the fact he's been coming on a game, it was about as least pressure as he would be under. Obviously, he did come on late in the game and was rewarded with that, with a celebratory coin in the head, which is just about sums up those scumbags, to be honest. You're up 3-0 against your arch rivals and cruising, and all he can manage to do to celebrate is throw coins at the opposition. It's just beggars belief. So yeah, glad to see him start. Glad to see McCowan get a start. Trusty, I think, was overdue coming back into the side and had to come in after that performance by Scales. Ida Kyogo, just a bit of rotation. We'll speak about Ida's performance in a little bit in more detail. I was happy with all the changes. I'd have liked to see Vi start ahead of Taylor, to be honest. I wanted that change for the derby, and we didn't see it. And he seems to be stubbornly sticking with them. And obviously very defensive of him in the press conference afterwards, which again we'll get into after the match analysis. So yeah, reasonably happy with the team. And yeah, it's just that time of year where we've got another game on Wednesday, and then another game at the weekend, and then another game midweek, another game at the weekend, and then it's Young Boys. So it's still a pretty intense couple of weeks of fixtures. So the squad is going to have to be rotated.
I think, you've got to look at it from the point of view of it's a way to play ourselves back into form, playing so many games in a tight sort of cluster of fixtures. Square Sausage Mick is saying here that we've been underperforming probably for the last couple of months. And then McLaughlin P saying we haven't been the same since the last international break. I'd say our home form has been okay in terms of our performances and ability to score goals at home. Doesn't seem to be a problem. It does definitely seem to be more of an issue away from home. And that's the likes of Kyogo not really firing. Adam Eden didn't actually get in the score sheet last night either. So your main goal contributors this season are Kuhn and Maeda. And a big part of their game is getting the ball early and having a lot of space. So at Celtic Park, that makes sense because we've got the biggest park in the country. So we take advantage of that. But until Leicester St Hamden's a big space as well. But when you start going to other grounds, there's a lot less space to play into. Teams tend to sit in and sort of nullify that space, make it even harder. And I think maybe that's where we need to get a little bit smarter. And I would give Celtic credit that we were a wee bit quicker moving the ball forward last night. Obviously, in comparison to the other night, not that there's much for comparison, but I think there was a comment here from John Clements. Yeah, let's say we got three really fast forwards. Why didn't we try the ball over the top more? And for me, when a team's pressing you into oblivion, like the Huns were doing last week, then surely the option is just to knock it into those corners and let Maeda run into space and let Kuhn run into space and at least get their defenders turning back. But we did it. I think we made it once the whole game. We've just got to sometimes have to be a little bit smarter when teams do want to get in our faces, that there is a way to sort of counter that. But bit of an observation anyway. But in terms of the game itself, I mean, Nicholas Toon has a lung busting run in the first minute of the game, gets an early corner from it. Adam Ida sort of headers wide, and you're thinking, well, at least we're starting on the right footing. And I think part of it at home was having Luke McCowan starting, because I felt that he was quite direct. And obviously he sort of gets involved in the first goal, and it's his sort of pass out wide that sort of unleashes Maeda. And, I kind of feel sometimes we may be taking another 2 or 3 passes to get the ball out to Maeda. And then by that point, Maeda's ran out of space. Whereas this time we just fed it to him early. Maeda takes one good touch to get the ball onto his left foot, and then whips a good, hard, firm cross across the box or across the goals. And Kuhn doesn't sort of, miss those. His finishing this year has been very good, particularly in those types of situations, and gives you the early lead, and you're sort of thinking, well, okay, we can sort of something to build on. And it's a really cold night, and St Mirren are on the back foot early doors, and then they end up, I think they managed one shot which came very, very late for the whole match. So we were fairly comprehensive, but nice goal, simple, elegant. It was, McCowan took 2 touches and then passed it out. Maeda takes 1 touch and passes it, and Troon finishes the first time. I mean, it's football at its simplest, but it's effective. And you just want to see more of it.
Yeah, I like the fact all 3 midfielders were involved. So I think it came from a goal kick that they just punted long. Trusty won the header. It came kind of awkwardly to Engels, but he just managed to get a bit of a cushion pass and push it into McGregor's feet, which, the way it dropped, I thought, it doesn't look like much, but it was a good little knock off the knockdown pass by Engels. And then McGregor just does what he does, simple pass into McCowan, and he gets his head up, as you say, 2 touches, one to get it out of his feet, one to get it out of his feet and past his man, drop the shoulder, and then he just slid a brilliant slide rule pass in behind, which is, what Maeda thrives on. And, that he gave the fullback a torrid time all night. And that was just another one he gets away. Obviously, VAR looked at it, and on first viewing, it looked pretty tight. But there was a trailing leg that was sort of easily keeping him on. If anything, it would have been near his shoulder, probably, as he was sort of sprinting forward. That might have been potentially offside, but he was on by a little bit to spare. And then he doesn't overcomplicate it and slides in a great well-weighted ball to Kuhn. And he doesn't. It's not a great strike. It's not. It's not probably the first time he scored a goal like that this season, where he hasn't quite. It's not like he's burst from the net. He's not absolutely picking his spot, but he's hitting it nice and early with enough power that the keeper just is off balance and not set. And I thought the keeper, I think, he's just come back on loan for a second spell on loan from, I can't remember, somewhere down south. I thought he had a poor night, to be honest. He didn't cover himself in glory.
See, I thought he was like the reserve goalie, because the keeper got recalled. The one that they had was on loan, and he got recalled, and he was the other goalie. I didn't realize that was the goalie who.
Yeah, no, that's Zach Hemmings. They brought him back from a previous loan. So,
he said too many Christmas drinks.
He wasn't quite set for that one and spilt it. And then obviously the third goal is a shocker, and just his handling in general. There was a few others that.
Well, there was the one. Well, you're getting it slightly ahead of yourself, but the one after that where it almost broke to Maeda, and he's and the keeper's in no man's land, and not a better player. That's not fair, but a player other than Maeda would have been able to dink the ball over the keeper's head, but it's not the ball you want falling to Maeda in that situation. But anyway, but like I said, that could have been 2-0 at that point. But yeah, their keeper had a howler, and the second goal, fantastic header, Austin Trusty, first goal for Celtic, brilliant header. I mean, he knew exactly what he was doing, but the marking, that's pretty average. I mean, he did well to lose his man, but
I'm going to give some credit to both him and the other players in the box, because the movement is what gives him the space. So I can't remember who it is sort of directly in front of Trusty, but he runs off Trusty further forward, and I think he draws 2, and then Trusty basically moves as if he's going in towards goal. He feints to go in, and then he just stops, and the defender goes backing away as if he's going to follow him in, and he just holds his position. And with the other bit of movement in front of him, he suddenly looks like he is in acres of space comparatively. And Engels' delivery was class. Like
I was just going to say that, because the thing for me here is that he beats the first man, but it just dips over the first man, if you know what I mean. Like, it's not like a loopy one that, you know, he's just whipped it with just enough height. Just
getting that action that, you know, the best crosses of the ball, guys like Beckham would, you know, just did it every single time. Whip, dip, pace. Trusty doesn't have to really put any power on that. He just has to meet it and guide it. The power's all already there. And look, Engels didn't beat his first man on every corner. He had a few that were a bit duff. So he's, you know, his delivery, at times is brilliant. We saw it for Kyogo's goal the other week. From the deep cross, that was very Beckham-esque, you know, from the deeper lying area and whipping it right into an area that's pretty much can't defend it. I think, and more games will lead to Engels being more consistent with delivery, because he'll be doing it more often. This chopping and changing probably isn't suiting him. And I know why the manager did it. He was coming under a bit of pressure, and at the time it was probably the right thing just to relieve him a little bit of that pressure. But I think that he's showing that he's now got some form behind him. He's added in product. He's obviously had a couple of man of the matches prior to this game, and I do think we missed him in the derby. Now, I'm not saying that his start would have been all and end all different. But that many people off the boil still going to struggle. But interestingly, the tide seems to be turning on social media on Engels. Doesn't take much, does it? A couple of man of the match performances in home matches.
We can be a fickle bunch. We can be a fickle support.
But there's a little bit of there's the new narrative. The original narrative was he's not showing up, he's not worth the money, blah blah blah. There's clearly a player there. But the new narrative is the games that we've done well in, he's played, and the games that we struggled in, he hasn't played. Which, you know, that's pretty straightforward. And it's, you know, again, it's not just down to him, but you know, that's something worth pointing out. And I think from here, he's certainly in the bigger games, he's got to play. You don't pay, and you pay for potential, but you don't pay 11 million quid to be more of a backup player.
If his form is like it is at the moment, then he starts. I mean, you know, there's not. You can't sort of turn and say that he's not performing. So if he keeps performing, he'll keep getting starts. I mean, obviously, Brendan will rotate through. Yeah, but
I guess the more he plays, that the form will come. And I get we've got to. You know, I'm an advocate of rotating, especially in this busy period. But there is also that other element of the more combinations of players play together, the slicker and better it works. You know, you see Kuhn and Johnston have built up a good understanding, but if one or the other or both of them are out of the team for a game or two, then it takes them a bit of time to get back up to speed. You know, there was one yesterday where they both just left it, and they left it to each other, and the defender got it, and then I think
they won it back.
They won it back, and then they didn't play enough. They created another chance. But I do think there's an element in key positions where you want players. Like, I really want us to bed in a centre back pairing now. I don't want us to be chopping and changing all the time. Like,
that's a good point, because I was just trying to say here, 20 clean sheets out of 16 clean sheets out of 20 in the league this year. So that's either been CCV and Stales or CCV and Trusty, realistically. I mean,
Trusty and Stales played a few together.
And Trusty and Stales played a few together as well. So three playing two positions. But I mean, surely after last night, I mean, you sort of say that Trusty looked pretty solid, and he seemed to be moving the ball a bit quicker. If that was the criticism at the last time we played the Huns, then he certainly was sorting that out.
I thought that was a funny public criticism in the aftermath. and yeah, and then obviously the bit of illness came through.
Yeah.
But again, you don't spend 5-6 million on a centre back and not try and get them in the team and get a partnership clicking. And up until the cup final, and I didn't think he was that bad in the first half of the cup final. I think there were plenty of other candidates that were under par as well. So I thought it was a funny choice and a funny bit of criticism. And yeah, horses for courses. I thought Liam's Girls did okay in that second half, but he badly regressed in the game the other night. And I'm keen to see Trusty get a run. He's obviously now got a goal under his belt. His confidence will be up. I thought he played reasonably well thus far. He's certainly got more pace than probably either of the other two. And I didn't think his passing has been that bad. Like, I think it's been okay.
He finds feet more often than not. I know. I don't really get that criticism either. Thank you for everyone joining us live in the comment section. Comment section is nice and live tonight, which is great. Please like this episode when you're on YouTube. It just helps other like-minded Celts see us. Maesh, one of our regular commentators in the chat, has put a couple of really interesting posts here that I just want to quickly bring up, and then I'm going to let Paul have a chance to respond, and I just need to duck away from the microphone just for 2 seconds. So the first one here is just talking about how basically Clement played with a midfield 6. Risky for Rangers, but it seemed to work, and we didn't really sort of respond to that. I know I'm sort of jumping between the 2 games here, but I just thought these points were quite interesting. Hibs are using the Moneyball strategy, one of my favorite movies. Absolutely love that movie, Brad Pitt. And what's his face? Chris, one of the Chris's. They're fourth in net XG differential. Expect them to be improving, and not surprised that they gave Rangers a hard time. Certainly did do that. And then the last one here, saying that the ball over the top with Celtic wouldn't have worked. Probably better had we played with more of a 10 against Rangers back 4. So there's a comment here from McLaughlin P saying that was probably how Roglic did so much damage against the Huns in years gone by. So, Paul, plenty to pick away there at. I'll give you just a minute or two and I'll be right back.
Good stuff. Yeah, look, appreciate the commentary, Mahesh, as always. I also wanted to highlight your comments last week. You were a bit of a lone voice in the commentary in relation to suggesting that it might not be as straightforward as most of us kind of felt. So well done for your analysis and sort of putting yourself out there when you were generally getting a bit of grief. In terms of the comments made, I think Clement's tactics were risky and they were better. And one of my frustrations was we talk a lot, and it's mentioned a lot that Rodgers' in-game management is one of the best things about his coaching. One of the reasons he's considered an elite manager. And I just thought he was so passive that, Anthony's right. We should have been making substitutions early in the game, and certainly half time. If we tie back into the comments we've just been making about the fact that Trusty was pulled at half time in the cup final and manager was pretty vocal about it was tactical, it makes it even stranger in my view that nothing happened at half time. As Anthony said earlier, both Hatate and Scales could have been pulled at half an hour. And that's making the same point. It just seems weird to me. It seems weird to me that you could be that decisive in the cup final when something wasn't that glaring, and then you've got 2 players who are glaringly miles off the pace, and they're allowed to continue until about the 60-odd minute. Now it's pure. This is pure rumor, and so. But I'm gonna mention it just because I've heard it from multiple sources. In that there was rumor that illness and sickness bug went on longer than had been made clear. More players were affected. Now, if that is true, and there's nothing concrete that it is, and you can see why the management team wouldn't want to dwell on that and sort of play on it. But it would make some sense as to why somebody like Scales wasn't hooked at halftime with Trusty in the bench if Trusty was still under the weather. But then for me,
Angles came on really late as well.
Really late. Yeah, really late as well. But for me, unless you've got they're the only fit they're the best of the ill players. Fill it up with kids. You know what I mean? Fill it up with kids. Unless you just try to spook your opposition that you've got the firepower to change it and hope you don't need it.
I think that was basically it. He was hoping that the starting 11 were going to do the business. And then, if this is true, I mean, obviously it's a bit of speculation, but as you say, if you've heard it from a few different places, then, I mean, it would make sense because, I mean, I haven't.
Well, it's the
first performance all season.
To me, it's the only thing that makes an ounce of sense in terms of why so many of them were miles off the pace. And this happened. It's not happened in another biggish game, and we later found out that there was a bunch of players that were sick a year or two ago. I'm sure this was a similar thing happened. Anyway, I just think the manager got his tactics wrong. I thought I thought that Taylor would start, but I fundamentally felt that Vi should have started. The main reason for that is one of two reasons, but the core reason for playing Taylor is because you want him to invert and load up the midfield. We were overrunning midfield, and he never really got inverted because he was too worried about Czerny on the outside of him, which is fair enough. He's a fullback; he's got to defend the winger, and also Scales was having a shocker, so he was kind of keeping one eye on that area as well. But that meant that Meira was asked to do even more. Yilmaz was powering in forward from defence and making probably more dangerous runs than Captain Disappointed would have made. So I think just generally the left side was in real trouble. Obviously, you had Hatate over there, and he was all over the shop as well. So yeah, generally it was just a really, really poor performance. And in terms of Hibs Moneyball, I'm not completely I love the movie as well. I love the concept, and to some degree, obviously, it's a concept we've loosely tried to not quite probably the same level of stats as in the movie, but and the sport is probably more set up for it in terms of baseball. But this concept of buying cheaper, developing, and selling for a profit is it fits the Moneyball concept. And if Hibs are going to make progress, on that, fair play to them. I say I'm delighted to see David Gray turn the corner. You never want to see like a club hero step up to the manager's job and then kind of ruin the legacy.
And he could have been sacked because they were on a horrible run of form.
They were,
and Hibs have got form for sacking managers left, right, and centre. So, the fact that
they are. This time, and to be honest, it was no like the only surprise to me in that game is Rangers were so far ahead early on. Like they were 2-0 up and it looked to be cruising. Because I think I said to you on the night or in the aftermath on the group chat, it would not surprise me one bit if they drop points at either Hibs, most likely, or potentially Dundee this weekend, because their away form is still shocking. I think
terrible.
There's an away league table doing the rounds, and I think
four wins in the last 15. I think, if memory serves me correctly.
Yeah, it's just shocking. So I think they will struggle up at Dens, and we obviously play before them. I think we played the day before even. So it could be interesting to see. Like all being well, if we can get another result on Saturday, then we could be 16 points clear before they go to play at Dens. So I mean I don't want to be underplay this whole blip thing because it was a worrying performance and a worrying lack of reaction. But I guess the bigger picture is if you look at where we were going into Christmas, 9 points clear, and then now we've come out 2.5 weeks later and we're 13 points clear. If anyone had told you that you would be 13 points,
27 better goal difference as well.
Yeah, if anyone had told us before Christmas you would go from 9 points to 13 points clear and you'd lose the derby, I don't think any of us would have expected that in the slightest. But I think we'd have all taken it, right? We've got a 4-point better differential, and we've lost a game. So it's.
I think the important thing here, Paul, is that's a valid point. And yes, in the league contest, I mean, you called the league months ago, but like, you know, that gap is widening, and I'll expect it to get closer to 20 points by the end of the season. Like, we should continue to open up that gap. But the important thing here is that we're not judging ourselves based on what that mob are doing over at Ibrox either. Like, if they're dropping points left, right, and centre, that's great, but we still have to be putting in the performances. And basically, our next big game now is Young Boys. So we've got to look at it from a point of view of we've got 3 or 4 games before we play Young Boys to string some performances together, have the tools in the tool chest ready to go, so that we get a result in that game and qualify for the next phase of the Champions League, because that will be massive. And, you know, there's also the financial benefits, but also, you know, just the experience and the players playing against some of the best players in the world, because there's some tasty opposition in that qualifying thing, which, you know, we'll talk more about that close to the time. But that's got, for me, that's got to be Brendan Rodgers, and I'm sure he is. He's not, you know, guy's not an idiot. He's very clever manager, but we've got to have that focus of ignore what they're doing, focus on what we are doing, and that's what he says in the media every week anyway. But just get ourselves performing better and more consistently, and scoring plenty of goals, and getting Ida and Kyogo into goal scoring form. And that's probably the tricky bit, is how do you do that? Well, I think the argument's to be made that excuse me, I think the argument's to be made that, you know, we need to be feeding them the ball earlier, and getting Ida and Kyogo to a slightly lesser extent playing between the goals, the goal width, and sort of feeding them in that area, rather than expecting them to drop into like right back to try and pick the ball up and then try and do something with it and miraculously score a goal. Like, it's asking a bit much of your centre forward, particularly when you play one up front. But for me, that's probably, I think, defensively, up until the Huns, we'd only conceded 4 goals in the league. All right, we're now up at 7 goals. Average is still really good there. Midfield, when it's going, is looking good. Wide players, I mean, you can't ask for much more out of Maeda and Kuhn. Like, they are producing assists and goals.
I think Kuhn's now 27 either assists or goals in 27 matches this season, which is phenomenal.
If you're being hypercritical, you've then got to look at your 2 centre forwards and try and figure out why, you know, because Ida hasn't really shown the form of the end of last season. So you don't know whether the £9 million price tag is weighing him down a little bit, and there's a little bit of expectation versus reality. He's a Celtic fan, so a wee bit of a Shane Duffy moment for him. I don't know, but like, just there's that aspect to it. There's the other aspect that, you know, he had a run where he was just coming off the bench, so he wasn't really getting a run of games. Kyogo was getting the preferential nod, and then, you know, Kyogo's not, I wouldn't say he's been 100% at his best either. So yeah,
also don't think we've got enough service to either of them, to be honest.
No, that's true. I
think we need to get better and more regular service. Like, I think Ida was a bit unlucky with an early one yesterday. I think if we get Engels in the team with his quality of delivery, Ida, especially, you know, I don't think we've seen much minutes with both Engels playing well and Ida on the pitch for a consistent amount of time. But the deliveries that Engels is capable of putting in, with the quality that Ida's got both in the air and on the ground and the first time finishing, if he gets a little bit of supply and he's got a bit of confidence, he'll get bucket loads of goals. I'm sure he will. So yeah, I just think it's an awkward one, because in an ideal world you'd give one of them a run, but neither of them are really, you know, jumping out at you as the person who deserves that.
Does the laddie from Shamrock Rovers come in any sort of consideration? He's come back off his loan spell.
It has expired and technically he's back. Shamrock Rovers want him back to see out their Europa Conference campaign, and I wouldn't be against that, to be honest. You know, Mayera there isn't enough game time for the two of them as it stands. So as long as one of them doesn't get an injury that keeps him out for any length of time, Mayera can fill in as a third striker if needs be. Palmer's a false 9 or 10. You know, we've got Daniel Cummings, who is apparently, it seems to be out of the picture because he's another one who's refusing to sign it. It's funny how Greg Taylor, the manager went so far hard into bat for Greg Taylor, who won't sign a new contract, but has seemed to frozen out an 18-year-old kid who won't sign a contract.
Well, I think there is a wee bit to that in the sense that, like, if you've got somebody in your dressing room who is performing and he feels he's part of his team, then you're gonna back him in and hopefully try and make him feel loved and make him change his mind. But if you've got a wee uppity 18-year-old saying, "Oh no, I want more money" or whatever, then Brennan's probably going, "Yeah, not for me." So I think there's a little bit of a difference there in terms of what the player. But my old man made this comment right at the start. We may as well talk about it now because we're sort of we're at that point of the night. But Brendan not a happy camper. So I mean, obviously this was based around the chanting for Kieran Tierney in the stands. Apparently Greg Taylor went straight up the tunnel after the match, didn't do the lap of honour with all the other players. So Brendan Rodgers, obviously, in my mind, trying to sort of stick up for his player and try to, you know, put the arm around him and, you know, hopefully get him to make the decision to sign. Because, you know, whether Greg Taylor's your first choice, second choice, whatever it is, you know, we've demonstrated over the years that left back has been a very hard position for us to fill. Like, we've had quite a number of candidates over the years, and none of them have really stuck. So, you know, admittedly, we're going to sell Bernabei for some money, which, you know, I'm sure that must rankle the Huns to no end. Like, they basically gave their players away at the start of the season, and we got a guy who can even get a game for us, and we're selling them for about £5 million. So, you know, the player trade model is alive and well, but again, it's Greg Taylor's. He's the whipping boy of the team. You know, Celtic's always had them, and at the moment, I feel he's the guy. He divides opinion as to, like, whether he's good, he's not good, he's good, he's bad. Certain games he's good, certain games he's bad. But I don't know if we'd be able to instantly replace him. I mean, all right, the talks are in Kieran Tierney, and yes, he would be an immediate replacement. He's battle hard and whatever. But then the question is, can Kieran Tierney play 60 games in the season? And the answer's no, highly unlikely. So you would still need Greg to be around. I mean, because the Alex Valle thing, all right, this will see us out this season, but then we're back to square one if he goes back to Barcelona, and probably every likelihood he will. So where does it leave you? Like, you're right, Kieran Tierney comes in, but you're really going to need someone, an able deputy, you know, somebody who's willing to jump in and potentially play 40, 50 games if Kieran picks up an injury and if that all goes through. So it's the old adage of be careful with what you wish for, because, you know, if Greg Taylor goes and we don't really adequately fill that second position up, you know, it sounds dumb, like left back, you should be able to find a left back, but we've really, really toiled and struggled to fill that position. And, you know, Rodgers sort of gets it, you know, doesn't want the fans getting on his players' back. I get that. But, you know, I guess after the performance on Thursday, a little bit of criticism from the stands was probably not totally unexpected. And maybe Rodgers deep down knows that the team weren't 100% and some of them were ill, but if he's not going to say it out in public, and I appreciate that as well, because I don't want him to turn out a Baltimore and making excuses and complaining, and, you know, and while I'm on that last point before I throw over to you, Paul, is that, you know, at what point does Clement get sanctioned by the SFA for the amount of times that he's criticised refereeing decisions, penalties, decisions that have gone against him? I mean, even Chris Boyd couldn't defend that penalty decision, and he's like crying the blues, going, "Oh, we're so hard done by." I mean, at some point, surely they've got to turn and say, "You need to pull your head in, Phil." But anyway, I'll leave you with that thought. Paul, I've covered a lot of topics there, mate. So maybe start with Brendan Rodgers' comments and then take it wherever way you want.
Yes, the Brendan Rodgers post-match interview, I found it a bit of a strange one, to be honest. There's two main topics he covered. I'll start with Greg Taylor, because that's where you spent the majority of your time. He basically said that by the Celtic fans singing for Kieran Tierney, they're disrespecting Greg Taylor. Now, I see you make the connection, but it's not like Greg Taylor was being booed. It's not like Greg Taylor was being negatively targeted. There is a very, very strong and seems credible rumour that Kieran Tierney to Celtic is near enough a done deal. I think the pre-contract is probably done for next season. I think the only thing that's probably stalling that announcement is we're trying to get him in for the remainder of this season. But that's more complicated, right? It would be being a loan from Arsenal or Arsenal tearing up his contract and allow him to come now, which I don't think they're necessarily going to do. Also, does Tierney want to walk away from best part of 100 grand a week for the next 4 months? Probably not. But if he's going to come sooner, how much of his wages are we willing to pick up? How much of his wages are Arsenal still willing to pick up? So that's what would be required for him to come on loan for the remainder of this current season. But given how big a hero Kieran Tierney was for the Celtic support previously and remains a Celtic fan and all those other things, with a strong rumour, which, let's be honest, Brendan Rodgers has barely tried to put anything. He's not trying to pour cold water onto that. If anything, he's kind of nudge, wink, wink, sort of encouraging the speculation. So for him then to have a bit of a go at the support for getting excited about that and singing for Kieran Tierney, who they all know he'll be watching the game on the telly because he's a fan. I don't take that as a slight against Greg Taylor. I can see how the managers try to twist it, but he was in a snippy mood generally. And for me, the whole interview smacks of deflection from a really, really poor performance. Oh, here we go. Bang on. That he hasn't really addressed. All he said is maybe it's because we were 14 points ahead, not good enough. It's unacceptable. And that, it's a blip. Look at our other form in the last 12 months. Now, I'll acknowledge the form over the last 12 months. It's been excellent. But you don't just get a free pass for going to Ibrox and just dropping your pants and getting absolutely shafted on the day. So I just think the bigger bit of the attack on the fans wasn't directly related to Greg Taylor. It was related to their reaction when, things get a bit tough, or, the player has to be, recycled and goes back and the point of attack gets changed. Now, I don't disagree with his comments here. And he basically said it's not on that Celtic fans, panic, get anxious, moan and groan and generally get upset when a player has to pass the ball back to, that's about changing the point of attack. That's why we do it. We move it to more than to retain the person. He used the language that's we've got to change the point of attack. We've got to shift it, move it. Because, he was a bit disparaging, to be honest. He sort of said something along the lines of, if you don't understand that, you don't really know football. Which was a little bit snippy. It wasn't arrogant. It wasn't arrogant. I do you know what? It was a little bit patronising, but it was very reminiscent for me of comments that Martin O'Neill made 25 years ago when it's almost identical. Not O'Neill delivered them better, but O'Neill, I'm pretty sure the quote was, and I meant to look it up before I came on, didn't quite have time. It was along the lines of, I can educate the players how to play in Europe. I can't educate the fans how to support in Europe. And it was essentially the exact same thing about sometimes in games we'll have to take a step back to take a step forward. We'll have to. I remember being in Parkhead for a Champions League game. Neil Lennon was booed for passing back to the keeper. He was booed, roundly booed by a big chunk of the support. We haven't really changed. In 25 years, we haven't matured as a support. We haven't matured to a point where we understand that sometimes we have to pass the ball back and sideways before we can go forward. And those comments, whilst they were a little bit patronised and arrogant, he was spot on. He was spot on in terms of, you need to understand what they're trying to do, and you can't just grumble at everything that doesn't quite go our way.
I guess the only counterpoint to that, Paul, would be that we're playing St Mirren and not playing Real Madrid. You've got to respect the opposition you're playing against. I get that, but I just think that sometimes we do fall into a wee bit of a habit of doing the old horseshoe of death passing the ball side to side, back to back. And
I
know the whole thing about changing the pivot of the attack, but when it goes from your fullback to your centre half, to the other centre half, to the other fullback, and back again, it kind of like you can see how understand how fans. I get frustrated watching it, sitting on TV, watching on TV. So
I think the point and problem with that is just the number of touches and the pace it's moved at, and the movement ahead of the ball, and that's, obviously the manager has to carry that because he's coaching the players, but the players in field have got to be better, and that's why fans get frustrated when players like Scales take 2, 3, 4 touches before they release them. Because if you are trying to change the point of attack, if you take 4 touches before you release it, the defense is reset. You can only you can only move the opposition around quickly if you shift the ball fast enough. I think so. I agree with him. I agree with the comments around that principle. I think his timing, it was a funny time to choose to do it on the back of such a terrible result. I think there is a bit of smoke and mirrors. I think there is a bit of deflection. It seemed like a funny time to come out and have a go at the fans for one thing, which is fair enough, but timing's poor, and one thing which I think is blown out of proportion.
You're not going to get me a culpa or Brendan Rodgers. I'm sorry, but we're never going to see that in our lifetime. I don't think he's just too. That's what makes him a very effective leader. But he's got a lot of pride. But it's a bit like Tony Soprano. But can't sort of, definitely not going to willing to admit if he's got something wrong. Paul, time is actually getting away from us. We're actually just under an hour already, so we've done pretty well. Apparently, we scored a third goal last night. I didn't see it. You didn't see it. Willie.
I've seen it in the highlights.
Willie texted us to tell us that Engels backheeled it to Kuhn, which made it sound like a really sexy goal. But when you actually saw it back, the goalkeeper, my goodness, he absolutely fluffed his lines there. Zach Hemming, we mentioned it earlier, but oh my goodness. I don't know what he tried to do, but I think it's got frightened by his defender standing over him. Anyway, but yeah, so the ball fell to Kuhn and he had a couple of touches, whacked it in the back of the net and went, thank you very much. That's probably the easiest goal I'm going to score all year. That made it 3-0. We made some changes. Nothing else much happened after that, as far as I can gather from the highlights, because, like I said, it was snowing on the screen that I was watching. And that was it. 3-0. Happy days. Paul, man of the match. Who was it?
Only really a couple of candidates for me. Which were our double goal scorer, Nicholas Kuhn. But in the style of our erstwhile colleague, Sean, I'll say, well, you're just not just going to give it to somebody just because they scored a goal or two. So I'm giving it for the third time in a row, I'm giving it to Arnie Engels. Oof. I thought his performance was great. I thought he covered lots of ground. His touches were good. Brilliant assist for the trusty goal. Obviously, he was involved in the final goal with Kuhn. But I just thought he started to really slot into that team and play like he belongs there. And that's now 3 home games in a row where he's had a meaningful impact. And yeah, I've been impressed with him right from the off, to be honest, but I think he's really coming onto the game. And if we continue to play him regularly, I think he can only get better.
Well, I'm going to totally disregard what Sean thinks and go with Nicholas Kuhn because I thought he had a great game. And yeah, it's a shame that he couldn't manage something like that on Thursday. But anyway, 2 goals and yeah, looked dangerous every time he got the ball and moving a lot better, and the overlap with AJ was looking good. So even when they stuffed it up, they managed to recycle possession and put St Mirren under pressure again. So no, couldn't for me. Split decision this week, but that's fine. Do we know who the actual man of the match for the game was? The Dafa bet man of the match? No,
like it didn't get. I forgot announced inside the ground. Didn't hear it because the quality of the.
Well, we didn't have commentary at that point, so we wouldn't know.
And then we did have it back. We did have it back, and then I thought, oh well, we'll get to see the goals and replay, and we'll get a bit of analysis.
And it come out.
Simon Donnelly, and it just went, thanks for watching. Fuck off. Well, thanks very much.
I know.
Honestly.
The one time you actually would have sat through Jerry McCulloch and then they didn't even show you that. I was like, oh. Anyway, frustrating night. Anyway, we got through it. We got the win. That's the important thing. Imagine if that was like a Celtic Rangers game and that happened. Woo. Anyway, Paul, we're at the recommendation stage, mate. So what have you got for us this week?
Yeah, so album recommendation is one that came out in September of last year. Well, we'll say last year. It's going to get introduced to be 2025 being this year is going to be awkward for a few more days, I would imagine. A Spanish garage indie rock band called Heinz, two-piece female Spanish indie group. I stumbled upon them because the lead singer from Fontaines DC appears as a guest vocalist in one of their tracks on their fourth album, which is called Viva Heinz. So yeah, album recommendation of the week is Viva Heinz by Heinz. Hinds, not Heinz.
Heinz. Okay, right, cool.
Heinz.
That's important clarification there. I started watching the Senna Limited series on Netflix. So it's a dramatization of Senna's life. Ayrton Senna, the obviously the famous Brazilian Formula One driver. So 3 episodes into that, it's a 6-episode run. So that's actually been it's actually quite well done. So a lot of Portuguese speakers and things, and they went with like a Brazilian sort of cast for when it's set in Brazil and stuff like that. So yeah, really, really good, enjoying that. So my wife is away this week for work, so we need to put our cork in it until the weekend and catch up the rest of that. But that'll be good. And then watched 2 movies because my sister-in-law has been here, so watched a couple of movies. One is a recommendation, one is a do not recommend, do not watch. So I'll go with the recommendation first. The first one was just Wonka, which is the Timothée Chalamet prequel to Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Actually really well done. It's a musical, but not too many songs. But yeah, actually really well done. Olivia Colman, I love her. Like, she's such a good actress. And yeah, it's just recognizable faces throughout that one. So yeah, really, really good. I highly recommend one watch for the family. And then one not to watch, Long Legs, which is like some sort of it is a horror slash thing with Nicolas Cage, who clearly just takes paychecks these days because this was terrible. And critics were raving about it, so like it got critically recommended. So like we heard good things. Nope, don't bother. Don't do it to yourselves. No good at all. So I don't very often give you a don't recommend, but I'm certainly that's 2 hours of my life that I am not getting back.
While we talked about saying nothing last. We talked about saying nothing last week. Binged it over the last sort of week of the holiday period. So the wife doesn't usually let me binge, but I think there must have been a day when we all had quite a bad hangover, and we watched 6 episodes on that day, which is pretty good effort. There's 9 in total. So yeah, thoroughly enjoyed it, and a lot of support are across it already.
And that's on my list when I said next time we get some time.
Apart from both actors, because it covers about a 40-year period from the early 70s, I think, right through to almost present day. In terms of the Troubles and beyond in Northern Ireland or the North of Ireland, Belfast. The main criticism, if I had it, is both actors that played Jerry Adams' accents were all over the place, to be honest. But sometimes they were not bad, and some other times they were. To be honest, I heard that already from mates.
Choose your own adventure, just like
Well, from mates who are from Belfast or around the West Belfast. And
it always reminds me of the actor that played Peter Baelish on Game of Thrones. Like, his accent used to change episode by episode. Like, sometimes it would be like a Belfast accent, and other times it'd just be something completely different. It's just whatever he felt like on the day. Clearly, it's very funny. So yeah, that's something. If you ever rewatch Game of Thrones, just keep an eye out for Peter Baelish and just we'll see it better.
But yeah, definitely worth a look. And for somebody who doesn't know, I obviously knew the key bits of that history, but not the detail around this stuff was pretty interesting, and included a pretty major disclaimer that Jerry Adams maintains he's never been part of the IRA or involved in IRA-related violence. So they were careful with that, but I believe that there's still a lawsuit coming from one of the people that was portrayed in it. No spoilers, but yeah, there's apparently a bit of a libel case on the back of it heading towards Disney. So yeah, but worth a look.
We'll be back next week. We've got obviously Dundee United at home during the week, and then a couple of days later we are playing Ross County on a nice 8:30 kickoff on a Saturday night. Indeed. But I think I'm picking my wife up from the airport, so I don't know how far to go. So I'm good.
I'm taking my mum down the club because give her another chance to redeem herself.
So. Redeem herself. Oof, okay, right, fair enough. I'll just make sure I don't wear my black away top next time. I think that was a jinx, personally. But anyway, all the jinxes in the world wouldn't have made any difference to that performance. So we'll be back next Monday night, 8 p.m. Western Standard Time, and we will cover the Ross County Celtic game. Hopefully 2 wins in the bag by the time you see us next time on screen. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much for getting involved in the chat comment section. Very much appreciated. We enjoy your company. And Paul, all that's left to say is hail, hail.
Hail, hail.